Welcome back into the Bangtan Universe wormhole. This is the final video in my analysis of the Wings era short films and MVs. I'll be covering the Japanese version of Blood, Sweat, and Tears today, and I have a radical new take on the MV that makes sense of a lot of things that didn't make sense before. If you aren't familiar with the Bangtan universe yet, you need to watch this video before you watch the current video. Otherwise, you won't have a clue what's going on. You'll also have an easier time understanding this video if you've watched my two-part analysis of the original Korean Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but that's up to you. Now let's get started. This idea about the Japanese BST really did come to me as an epiphany. I had something totally different in mind, but when I sat down at my computer and read my old notes, a new idea struck me that makes sense of everything. It's a pretty simple idea too. What if the Japanese BST shows us one or more failed loops that took place before the successful loop we saw in the Korean BST? We know Seokjin made more loops than we can count in the HYYH era, so it seems likely that he'd have done the same thing in the Wings era. He wouldn't necessarily have had to save his friends' lives, but he would still have to save them from making terrible decisions that would impact their futures. So as I analyze the Japanese BST in this video, I'll be discussing it from the point of view of it being a failed loop. That will explain some of the awful things we see happen, especially to Jungkook and Taehyung. Just one little note. I didn't have this epiphany until after I posted the analysis of the Korean BST, so you'll find a few small inconsistencies between what I said then and what I'm saying now, but don't worry, it won't affect anything important. Now let's get started. I'll talk about the young matinee pairs one at a time to make them easier for you to understand, and I'll show you how Seokjin reacts to each of the disasters he witnesses. We'll start with Jungkook and Namjoon. The MV starts with Jungkook lying on his back with his hands folded as if he's dead, and maybe he did die in the prior loop. In this loop, his character probably wishes he was dead because he's clearly hungover. When he sits up on the edge of the bed, the slant of the exaggerated colors makes us feel like he's about to lean forward and produce what Generation X kids used to call a technicolor yawn. Fortunately, if he does that, it's off screen. A little later, he looks behind himself at the mattress, and we see a print of what might be wings, except that they look incomplete and much too small compared to the wings Taehyung grew in the tour trailer. The color is strange too. They look like they were meant to be hot pink, which fits this era's theme of passion, but this is a more watered-down color that looks sort of pinkish purple. It's like he's trying to reach the next level of development, which is what he should be doing, but he's going about it all wrong. And Seokjin knows what's happening to him because he's always watching his friends from afar. This painting is the fall of the rebel angels, which Seokjin studied in the Korean BST too. In that MV, he was worried that when his friends lost their innocence, they might fall too far into sin and become devilish. Now we understand his worry better. He'd already seen his friends fall far enough to hurt themselves and each other very badly. The red tint that covers this and other scenes from the Korean BST reinforce how different this loop is from the final one. No one's actually in hell here, but it is a bit hot. And notice what's happening with the angel. In the Korean BST, Taehyung uncovered Seokjin's eyes to show him that angel. But here, Taehyung or someone else is covering Seokjin's eyes to prevent him from seeing it. This next clip is just a couple of seconds long, but it sets up an extended scene, so I'll pause it and explain what we're looking at. Namjoon has created a parody of the initiation Seokjin led his friends through in the Korean BST. We have the exaggerated colors, the ritual drink, and the leader of the initiation at the end of the table. But he's not at the head of the table, he's at its foot. And instead of wearing formal ritual white, he and Jungkook are in dark casual clothes. Now let's take a look at Namjoon's private room, and it really is private. Jungkook never comes in here. Namjoon has a vase of red roses, which traditionally symbolize romantic love and passion, but they don't seem to symbolize anything here, and he's not even paying attention to them. He hasn't even done anything about the rose with the broken stem. Another thing he doesn't seem to notice is the glass of absinthe on his table. He doesn't touch it once throughout the video. As for his furnishings, most of them are kitschy, aside from the curtains. Those are luxurious. But that's because they're framing something that really matters to Namjoon, a mirror. And as he turns to look at himself, he's singing the lines, "But your wings are those of a devil. Before you're sweet, there's bitter." Now, Namjoon isn't literally a devil, but in this loop, he's certainly a jerk with no sense of morality as far as we can see. The real Namjoon said in a behind-the-scenes video that the Japanese BST had a cold, dark vibe, and he wasn't kidding. Now it's back to the window room, where he brings the absinthe to Jungkook and almost shoves it at him. To be clear, it's not really absinthe. The Japanese BST has a more realistic look than the Korean BST, but parts of it are still symbolic, and that includes this scene. Namjoon isn't really giving Jungkook absinthe, but since absinthe has about twice as much alcohol by volume as soju, Namjoon is probably giving him something else with a very high ABV. And in this version of BST, he isn't just giving Jungkook a taste of it. He's giving him a whole glass, undiluted. And first he makes a toast, just like Seokjin did in the Korean BST. Except Namjoon doesn't toast Jungkook, he toasts the city. And he does seem to be trying to corrupt Jungkook in this version of BST. He's not showing off or messing around like he was in the Korean version. Here, he takes Jungkook by the neck and practically pours the liquor down his throat. Now, I don't think Namjoon is forcing Jungkook to do something Jungkook doesn't want to do. It's more like he's taking advantage of the temptation that most people feel at that age. Jungkook is naturally curious, and Namjoon is perfectly willing to satisfy his curiosity. You already know that Namjoon's motto is "You must survive," and that he always puts his own needs first, but he's still a kind person, or at least he has been until now. In this loop, he's a lot less kind. Now, what does Seokjin think about all this? He knows at least some of what's happening to Jungkook, and it's tearing him apart. Notice how the ground around his truck is briefly hot pink, the color it should be in this era, but the hot pink disappears in a typhoon of other colors. The problem is that he just can't barge in on the scene and stop it. He learned long ago that barging in never works. He has to subtly influence his friends without telling them what to do. Anything else leads to disaster. And Jungkook is facing disaster right now. In the Korean BST, he learned to fly like an angel, but here he's falling like Icarus. Yoongi tries to help, but Jungkook just pushes him away. He's so drunk that he feels like he's broken through some kind of wormhole into another reality. And maybe he really has broken through a wormhole, since his character has been linked to wormholes since he was a kid. But we're not sure what's really happening to him right now. And we're not sure what Namjoon is really seeing right now. All we know is that Namjoon isn't worried about it. Now smoke fills the bathroom, and although it's hard to see its color due to the pink lighting, the smoke is green. So here, at least, we have some appropriate colors for the Wings era. Green for youth, and pink for lust, passion, exploration, and so on. But despite the colors being right, underage drinking still is not okay. And based on the scene that started this video, with Jungkook waking up in bed hungover, he might be starting to drink alone. That could lead him down the road to alcoholism. Meanwhile, Seokjin's view of this situation is especially dire. It's not clear whether this growing crack represents his thoughts about the current time loop, or whether he senses that something about Jungkook's situation could destroy reality. Since Jungkook is the secret center of it all, the latter is definitely possible. Unfortunately, we don't have an answer to this question yet. Maybe we'll get it in the next era. As for us, it's time to return to Namjoon's private room, where all the furniture has disappeared. The carpet is littered with broken shards, and landscape with the fall of Icarus has replaced Namjoon's mirror. If he tried to look at himself now, he'd only see Jungkook's fall, and he'd know that that fall was due to him. But he's still trying to excuse himself. These scratches on his knuckles almost certainly came from the night he punched a customer at the gas station. And notice his expression as he shows the scratches to us. It's like he's saying, "This is just the way I am." Yoongi's idea of mentoring is almost the exact opposite of Namjoon's idea. His goal is to protect Jimin from harm by protecting him from temptation. And because Yoongi is a man of extremes, he decides that the best way to protect Jimin from temptation is to keep him from even seeing it. In the Korean BST, he blindfolded Jimin and maybe locked him in a room. In the Japanese BST, he's just watching him like a hawk. But exploration and experimentation are necessary parts of this stage of life. So even though Yoongi thinks he's helping Jimin, he's actually hurting him. Something else is going on in Jimin's story, though. This version of Jimin is holding an apple which he hasn't bitten yet, and he's wearing the shirt he wore during the dance sequences in his short film Lie. But seconds later, a different version of Jimin is in a traffic tunnel with Yoongi. You can see a piano behind them, but it doesn't matter for once. What matters is that this guy in the striped sweater is literally not the same version of Jimin we saw in Yoongi's room. The one in Yoongi's room was holding the apple and thinking about biting it, but he hadn't bitten it yet. He was still innocent. This Jimin has clearly bitten the apple because he pushes Yoongi's hand away and then starts walking down the road away from him. Now he does look back to check Yoongi's reaction because he does care about Yoongi. And it's possible that if Yoongi called out to him then, or even just reached out a hand, Jimin could have returned. But Yoongi is just standing there watching. The next scene takes place in a house we haven't seen before. The rebellious Jimin is eating an apple, and judging by his expression, he's still feeling rebellious. He grinds up the apple in a blender either to make a smoothie or a mixed drink, but we never find out because the scene shifts again. It's hard to keep track of the chronology here because at first glance it looks like he's still running away from Yoongi, but he's also wiping his mouth as if he's just eaten that apple or smoothie or whatever it was. Maybe this is a dream sequence, which would actually make sense because near the end of Notes 2, Jimin met his younger self at the Arboretum in something that seemed like a dream sequence, even though it actually turned out to be real. And this could be the same type of dream sequence because rebellious Jimin is about to meet innocent Jimin. But before he does, we get this odd out-of-place shot in which Jimin leans his forehead against a mirror. If this looks familiar, that's because he did something similar in the highlight reel when he was washing blood off his arm. And then later in his solo album Face, he made a callback to this moment in the video for Like Crazy. We're also going to see a reversed version of this shot before long. Jimin's arc in the BU has a lot of doubling, which means his story probably includes a secret we don't know about yet. All we do know is that this shirt, the one from Lie, predicted he'd face himself like this. Look closely at the squiggles on the front panels. They form two male faces looking at each other. And now it's time to wonder if this story is a dream sequence, because Jimin was running outside, and now he's inside, and I'm sure he didn't break into anyone's home to get there. But we can save that thought for later because you and I both know what's about to happen, and that's more important than anything else. We know the two Jimins are about to meet each other, and rebellious Jimin will get yanked backwards through a wormhole. But let me point out some things you might not have considered. First, each Jimin seems to sense the other before he sees him. Second, Yoongi seems to sense the other Jimin too. That's why he's almost able to block innocent Jimin from seeing him. But why does Yoongi want to block innocent Jimin from seeing rebellious Jimin? Or is this whole scene symbolic? That last question, whether or not the scene is symbolic, is the most important one because of its long-term implications. So let's consider the question from both points of view. If the scene is symbolic, then Yoongi is just doing what he's been doing all along, trying to protect innocent Jimin from anything that might tempt him. But let's take the idea forward. No matter what Yoongi does, Jimin will eventually see something of the outside world, and he'll at least imagine what he could become. And if he isn't prepared for that when it happens, he might be so shocked that he symbolically drops the apple, which would mean that he loses the choice to mature in a healthy way. And remember that Jimin's development has already been stunted because thanks to his parents, he spent half his childhood in psych wards. Think how much more his development will be stunted if he's not allowed to question and grow right now. So those are the implications of this scene if it is entirely symbolic. Now let's imagine that it's mostly literal and that two versions of Jimin really do see each other, after which one gets yanked through a wormhole. First, this would prove unquestionably that wormholes exist in the BU, something Q and I never doubted. And it gives us a hint about how time travel works in this universe. It would tell us that while characters can time travel in the BU, they can't see other versions of themselves, except under special circumstances. And we've already seen one of them. Present-day Jimin traveled into the past at the Arboretum and comforted his younger self. We still don't know why he was able to do that, but we're pretty sure the butterfly was involved. But if this scene is literal, then we have another question to address, and this one is about Yoongi. He couldn't block innocent Jimin from seeing rebel Jimin, but he came pretty darn close. And the only way he could have come that close is if he knew rebel Jimin was coming, and knew the danger of innocent Jimin seeing him. But how could Yoongi know that? Has he traveled through time? Well, Q and I have a theory that could fit that scenario. We believe that in the next era of the BU, the cat will split our heroes across time, space, and the multiverse. That means Yoongi could end up in a different time period, and eventually he might end up in this scene with the two Jimins. But if this scene is literal, we have even more questions to ask. And the longer I think about it, the more questions I can come up with. So I'll stop right here and just throw out some questions that I won't try to answer. You can tell me what you think about them in the comments. So here we go. First, what happened to rebel Jimin when he got flung through the wormhole? Was he sent back to his own time and place? Or was he deleted entirely from the timeline? That would be kind of horrible. And what about the dropped apple? Would it have any special significance in this scenario? Let us know what you think in the comments. And now we come to our last pairing. We already know from the Korean BST that Taehyung does not want to be initiated into the next stage of development because his betrayal by Namjoon has made him distrustful of everyone, including Hoseok. And even though Hoseok has a good heart, he doesn't make the best choices in this time loop. We started the house where Jimin put the apple in the blender. And I'll go ahead and tell you now that I know where this is. It's the cottage at the beach where Seokjin planned for everyone to spend the night as a celebration for him completing his mission. We don't have clear time frames for most of the events in this MV, but there's a scene in this section which is connected to one specific time and place in the notes. First though, Taehyung starts out wandering through the house, rubbing his eyes and looking very unhappy. Just for a moment we see Jimin and Jungkook behind him, and judging by their expressions, they have no idea what's going on with him. This fits if everyone has just arrived at the cottage, because on the way there, Taehyung overheard Namjoon talking on the phone, and he misunderstood his words and thought that Namjoon was trying to ditch him. Faint colors trail behind Taehyung, pinks and greens, and enough other colors to show us that he's making good progress through this era so far. But he hasn't been initiated yet, and Hoseok is about to give it a try, and fail very badly. Either this start is symbolic, or Hoseok is just pretending he's about to throw it. But either way, Taehyung is so scared that it takes two other people to hold him down. Despite the familiar hot pink in this scene, the vibe is more like an intervention than an initiation. And Taehyung really might think his friends are about to confront him over something he's done wrong. After all, he hasn't told anyone that his father regularly beats him and his sister, or that lately he's been having deja vu about killing his father. He might wonder if his friends expect him to report his father to the police, and he might wonder if they think he's crazy, or he might wonder if his friends are crazy. They're certainly less kind than they've been in previous loops. Just look at Jimin and Jungkook's faces right now. They're enjoying holding Taehyung down. We can probably chalk at least some of this up to their hyungs, especially Namjoon. And look, he's right in the middle of everything, ignoring the fear on his other Manne's face and looking at Hoseok instead. That's why this scene is interrupted by this fairly long shot from the Korean BST. Taehyung told us in the behind-the-scenes video for that MV that the veil symbolized the hurt his character was going through, and the implication was that that hurt was due to Namjoon. Now notice what happens when Hoseok throws the dart, or pretends to. This splash of colors looks a bit like the splash from the Korean BST, although that scene came after Seokjin kissed the angel when everyone was celebrating. Taehyung is definitely not celebrating, and Hoseok has gone off to his room to sing "It's okay even if it hurts, just tighten me quick," which seems extremely appropriate in this context. But Hoseok's mind seems to flash back to Taehyung flinching, and he seems to feel really bad about that. Then he remembers the scene we saw in the onstage prologue when everyone was gathered around the bonfire and he threw his pills in. But this time he throws them into a lamp, and that's not the only difference in the scene. His guilt is changing things in his imagination, and all the happiness has disappeared from the scene. Taehyung is leaning forward, resolutely staring at no one. Namjoon is staring at him from behind, or maybe he's staring at Hoseok, it's hard to tell. Either way, the blame is on Hoseok for accidentally hurting Taehyung. Jungkook is leaning toward Hoseok and sucking the blue lollipop we've seen before. Yoongi's leaning backwards, disconnected from everything, and Jimin is ignoring him in favor of staring into the lamp. And now we get the most confusing scene of the MV, which I can explain to you thanks to my epiphany. This scene is how I know where they are. Seokjin punched Taehyung at the beach cottage when they were both in a state of high emotion, but Seokjin only punched him once in the notes, and here he pushes him to the floor and punches him at least 6 times. Then he whispers, "I'm sorry," but it's too late for that. Taehyung gets up with a bottle in his hand and takes a swing at Seokjin. This scene alone is enough to tell us we're in a time loop we haven't seen before. And as I said at the beginning of this video, I think everything in this MV takes place in one or more alternate time loops. Taehyung's part, at least, takes place after Seokjin saved him from killing his father and jumping off the platform, because otherwise they'd never have made it to the cottage. But this loop must take place prior to the loop in which Seokjin hit Taehyung just once. I say that because if Seokjin was angry enough to hit Taehyung several times in one loop, and then to say sorry, he'd try very hard to hold his temper in the next loop. But then, if he got angry enough to hit him anyway, he'd be able to restrain himself to just one punch. And I can't imagine any circumstances in which Seokjin would be more violent in the second loop than the first. On top of that, the Namjoon we see in this loop wouldn't intervene in the argument. But the loop we read about in Notes 1 does show Namjoon interfering. He tries to calm Taehyung down, but fails. I'm so glad I figured this out. Before I realized this was a failed loop we never knew about, I couldn't figure out why Seokjin beat up Taehyung so badly in the MV when he only hit him once in the other sources. The funny thing is, Jae-ho hinted at the secrets hidden in this MV. Here, have a look. So why did Taehyung decide to jump when he no longer had the guilt of knowing he'd killed his father? The Notes 1 version of the scene shows that he seemed to remember killing his father over and over again, but that didn't make him want to jump off the cottage roof. And the Notes 1 version also explained how he misunderstood Namjoon's phone call and felt resentful about that. Those 2 incidents are what led him to yell at Seokjin, and Seokjin punched him because he was keyed up for a different reason. But after their argument, Taehyung just stormed out. What made him try to jump in this loop? I think there were 2 things. The first was that Hoseok's failed attempt at an initiation scared him really badly. And the second reason was that Seokjin didn't just hit him once, he really wailed on him. Notice Taehyung's expression when he jumps up to strike back. He's not in his right mind here. And judging by his expression as he climbs the stairs, he's still not in his right mind. Meanwhile, the Japanese BST has already reminded us about the veil he was under, the veil that signified how badly he'd been hurt, and now we see him pushing his way through at least a dozen veils. When you put all these things together, you understand his frame of mind. But that's not the last thing we see in Taehyung's loop. While he's still looking up at the sky and possibly considering not jumping, we see Hoseok looking up into some tall bushes or trees where a pair of green wings is shining. He's a naturally hopeful person, and so he still feels hope even in this loop, but he doesn't know everything Seokjin knows. I split up the original video and rearranged it to tell its stories one at a time, but in the original version, all 3 stories went downhill together. And near the end of the MV, all 3 Magnes had ditched their hyungs, not because they were ready to fly on their own, but because their hyungs hadn't done them any good. And last but most importantly, Taehyung might be about to jump to his death again. At this point, Seokjin does something we've always wondered if he could do. He looks into a wormhole and makes a conscious decision to use it. Until now, we've only seen his loops restart on their own when one of his friends died or was injured too badly to fulfill his dreams. But Seokjin restarts this loop on his own. He tilts his head in a somehow deliberate way, and the glass in front of him just cracks. We were already familiar with the cracking glass, but the rest is new to us. Now notice the hole in his sweater over his heart. Seokjin carries a wormhole within himself. That's how he's able to reset the time loop. Then cherry blossoms fall, and that always signals something good. At that point, the new loop starts, as always, with Namjoon. Seokjin visits him at the gas station and gives him a lighter to replace his lollipop. In fact, it's a green lighter to symbolize youth. But it's also a symbol that Seokjin will watch over Namjoon more carefully from now on. Q and I like to toss around theories, examining them from every angle and deciding whether they stand up to scrutiny. Here's one we can neither prove nor disprove, but if it turns out to be true, it'll explain even more about the Korean BST. We've mentioned the multiverse in several of our videos, and we've even speculated that certain BU characters came from or went to other universes. We've also speculated, just between the two of us, that the Japanese MVs might be set in an entirely different universe than the Korean MVs. That's a crazy idea, but it would explain why Namjoon acts like an entirely different person here than in the Korean MVs. So drop us a comment and let us know whether you think the Japanese MVs might be set in another universe. And please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, since that helps us get noticed by the YouTube algorithm, which helps you find our latest content. Abo bangpo!